killed and 33 others wounded in twin suicide bombings in Uganda's capital, Kampala. Police say the attacks, which took place within 3 minutes of each other on Tuesday, were carried out by 3 suicide bombers. For more on this, I'm joined by a freelance foreign affairs journalist, Peter Fabricius. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Fabricius. Thank you for your time. Now, the Allied Democratic Forces have claimed responsibility for this blast. Tell us a bit about them and why they are taking this route.
Yeah, hi. Well, they're kind of quite a difficult organization to get a grip on. You know, they originate from Uganda, but they moved into the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo quite a long time ago, in the late 90s, I think, or shortly after that, because they were very aggressively pursued by the Ugandan security forces. And they have these links with jihadism, which are not quite clear, you know. They are affiliated, it would seem, to Islamic State through something called the Islamic State Central Africa Province, which incidentally the jihadist insurgency in northern Mozambique, in Cabo Delgado province, also belongs to. And the precise links between those are not absolutely clear, but there do appear to be links. So this is an organization that has wrought complete mayhem in eastern DRC. They are very ruthless and brutal. They attack civilians in numbers. They behead people. They basically kill as many civilians as they can. But it seems like lately they are beginning to refocus quite a lot of their attention in Uganda, which is where they originate. And it's not yet completely clear what that was about. There were these previous attacks last month in which people were killed in a cafe near Kampala and on a bus, out of the city. And now these attacks, in which 3 people have died, as you said. So this is quite an alarming development, I think.
And are these incidents all linked? Is the Allied Democratic Force the one behind all the incidences thus far?
Well, of course, I don't know that. It seems that they've claimed that. The government seems to think that. There are always people who are skeptical about these connections, as there have been in northern Mozambique. There are a lot of people who don't really believe that insurgency should be regarded as Islamic State. It's simply something that's evolved out of local response to local conditions, local deprivation, and so on. The two, of course, are not mutually exclusive. It can be both, and that's, I believe that it is both. But it's also what you mean by affiliated to Islamic State. It doesn't necessarily mean that somebody in Syria or Iraq is giving orders for attacks in Kampala or Cabo Delgado. It just means that they're inspired by these local organizations are inspired by Islamic State. There may be links. There've been suggestions of training and an exchange of operatives between the ADF and the insurgency in Cabo Delgado and so on. So there's definitely something going on. I do believe this is probably ADF. It's hard to imagine who else it would be, and this is some kind of cynical attempt. Some people probably think that I don't know, for the state to do that, to blame people and try to incriminate the opposition. I don't think so. It looks to me like a genuinely terrorist attack,
And let's talk about this rise of terrorism in Uganda. What are the issues underlining that?
Yeah, again, look, I mean, there's a lot of opposition to the government of President Yoweri Museveni, and with good reason. That he's running basically what is an autocratic state disguised as a democracy. He has regular elections, but no one ever wins them except him. We've seen how he's persecuted the internal non-violent political opposition, particularly the former or current gospel singer opposition is Bobby Wine. So I think that the ADF probably has some of the same grievances that any opposition might have in Uganda against an increasingly autocratic state, and that opposition is stifled and suppressed. Now, one would also have to ask with an organization like that, which is limited to Islamic State, are they hoping to try and impose some kind of Sharia state in Uganda, which seems a little ambitious, to put it mildly. It's a country that only has a 14% or so Islamic, population. But yeah, effectively, operationally, you could say that if the government of Uganda was more democratic, the possibility of these attacks would be fewer. And there's another factor here, and that is that you would expect on the face of it that an organization that's affiliated to the Islamic State would have no connections with Al-Shabaab, for example, in Somalia, which is affiliated to Al-Qaeda. But there have been suggestions, including in a recent report by the International Center for the Study of Radicalization, that in fact the ADF and Al-Shabaab enjoy quite strong connections. And Al-Shabaab has agreements with Uganda since it went into Somalia a while back as part of the AMISOM, the AU force to fight Al-Shabaab. So there are a complex mix of possible reasons for this attack, for these attacks.
Can there be any sort of connections made to the insurgency that we're seeing in Mozambique?
Yeah, well, as I said, both on the face of it, if you believe this, and I haven't seen enough reason to disbelieve it, they both they allied, the ADF and it's got various names. Sometimes people just call it colloquially Al-Shabaab, but it's Alu, Salwa or Jama in Cabo Delgado. Both are members of the Islamic State Central Africa province. So in that sense, they do have this kind of organizational, I would say a fairly loose organizational relationship. And there are suggestions of more than that, operational, some kind of operational cooperation, training, possibly financing support. And they in any case, seem to draw quite a lot of their inspiration from the same ideology.
And how can regional leaders as well as business better react to this rising insurgency?
Yeah, that is a very difficult question. In the first instance, I mean, in both cases, one could say that the origins of these organizations lie in basic lack of governance in the countries involved. Neglect. I mean, Cabo Delgado is widely cited as a very neglected province. It's right in the north of Mozambique. It's far away from the capital, and it's just been left to its own devices. I mean, they've discovered huge amounts of gas, which on the process still are being exploited. But part of the reason some people give for the rise of the insurgency in Cabo Delgado is a sense of these people that they were never going to benefit from this bonanza of gas that was discovered in the area. And likewise in Uganda, you have, as I said, a democratic deficit and feelings of minority groups of feeling that they discriminated against. It's obviously not a one-sided argument. I mean, clearly these groups draw their inspiration from jihadism, which in some ways cannot be satisfied by any kind of reasonable response. So, I mean, on the one hand, governments should make sure that they are properly governing all parts of their territory. On the other hand, when it comes to push comes to shove, as it has in Cabo Delgado and in Uganda and in Eastern DRC, you unfortunately have to mobilize troops against it. And a lot of people are not aware of the fact that South Africa is also fighting the ADF, actually. We have a contingent of troops in the Eastern DRC, the Force Intervention Brigade, as it's called, which comprises at the moment SADC countries, but it's getting other elements. It's part of the UN, and one of its missions is to go after these so-called negative armed groups. They're like the ADF, which has become a formidable foe, by the way, for the UN. Their methods are really very difficult to counter because whenever anybody like the UN or the local security forces go after them. They retaliate massively by slaughtering civilians, as a deterrent. So they're a very difficult group to fight.
And you've just mentioned that they're a very difficult group to fight, but are there measures and infrastructures that are put in place, and I guess a level of intelligence on the ground that is able to discern and decipher and at least be able to track some of the movements of ADF?
Yeah, well, what is needed is security cooperation. I'm pretty sure that you're getting that already amongst East African countries and assisted, I would imagine, also by countries like the US and the UK, which obviously have a wider interest in countering anything that smacks of Islamic State because of its, for no other reason, because of its global reach. So, as I said, you basically have to throw everything at it. You have to make sure that you are addressing the underlying grievances, and then all the way through to mounting efficient military operations. You can't do away with military operations, much as you'd like to. And of course, they become more and more unavoidable the more you have neglected the underlying cause. I mean, the insurgency in Mozambique could have been addressed. It wasn't even addressed at a military level, actually, when it first erupted in October 2017, when it would have been much easier to deal with. And Mozambique, as we saw, resisted efforts by the region to send in forces until in July this year. And I mean, and of course the region in itself took a while to respond. But if that thing had been nipped in the bud, even at the military level, and certainly at the widest, social and socioeconomic level, it probably would not have evolved into the larger threat that it has latterly come to present.
Well, we'll leave it at that for this afternoon. Thank you for your time and putting all of that into perspective for us. That's Peter Fabricius, Institute for Security Studies researcher. Thank you for your time.